Property buyers in China are threatening to walk away from their mortgages, which could cause some serious problems for their banking industry. That's what we're going to dive into in this video. So guys, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and drop a meow in that chat. You're watching More Money. Let's get it. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel where the goal here is to help at least 1,000 people achieve financial independence much sooner. And this one's very interesting because this is another sort of leg on that real estate crisis that we have been talking about a lot on this channel, but I'm surprised that not a lot of people have been sort of mentioning it and the going-ons of it. I actually put out a 4-part series on the real estate issue that I will link to at the end of this video. But first, let's dive right into this news. So you can see that the China property market is being threatened as buyers have threatened to stop mortgage payments. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the bank shares and developers' bonds have come down in value as a result of this issue. And diving a little bit further into it, you could see and you can side with the homeowners here because there's a movement among frustrated homeowners who have threatened to stop paying their mortgages on unfinished homes quickly gathered steam on Chinese social media. People all over the country declared that they would do the same if the developers don't fulfill their promises to deliver apartments that were earlier pre-sold. And so that, of course, is collapsing the share prices for the banks. But this makes a lot of sense, and I fall on the side of the property buyers. If you're buying a property and then the developer is not able to finish that property, but they're also not able to refund you, why should the person who bought that property continue to pay the mortgage on something that's not being delivered? Now, pressure has been building in China's housing market since authorities put into place the rules to prevent excessive borrowing by the country's developers. So this is what sort of like kicked off that real estate crisis. I dive deeper into it into that 4-part series, which I once again will link at the end of this video. But now, aggregate new home sales at the country's 100th largest developers have fallen every month on a year-over-year basis since last July. Home prices have also been following, and private indicators of housing prices have been showing far bigger drops than Chinese official data. So the other thing that I would say is that don't believe in the non-performing loans ratio that the banks are reporting, and don't believe in the pricing data that the CCP is providing you. I think that there's other indicators that are suggesting that the situation could be worse. Now, earlier in the week, there was a list of around 30 property projects in which homeowners have said they would stop paying their mortgages, which appeared on Chinese social media and was picked up by several research firms. By Thursday of that past week when this occurred, that list grew to more than 200 projects, including unfinished buildings by multiple developers. Now, if you're not familiar with what's actually happening here, let me try to explain it quickly. Once again, I do dive deeper into this in that 4-part series, but you can see here, as mentioned in the China property market series, which I did release on this channel, development of many projects have stalled as property developers have faced severe cash shortages and are unable to pay vendors to continue to work on projects. This has occurred because property developers use the cash from customers to buy up more land leases in hopes to sell up more property in the future, which did not materialize. So now they're stuck with unsaleable land leases and unfinished projects. It's fully understandable why Chinese citizens would want to stop paying their mortgages on homes that have not yet been delivered. The government was happy to push this scheme as there's no real property tax in China, and most of the local government tax revenue comes from land lease sales. So everybody along the sort of chain is complicit here. The government is complicit, the builders are complicit, and the purchasers of these properties are the ones that are sort of left out in the dust. And so the government absolutely has to step in and do something because they're the ones who ultimately created this situation to begin with. And like I concluded in that 4-part series, the only way out of this situation is you have to have a property tax come into play in China. But they're not doing that. They actually continue to walk away from it. In fact, what are they doing? They're actually trying to now continue to encourage more home buying and thus more land lease sales. You can see here, Chinese authorities and local governments have actually been attempting to reinvigorate the housing market for months now. the banks have cut mortgage rates for first-time buyers, and the cities have lowered down payment requirements. However, despite that, the consumers aren't biting. Sales for the country's top 100 developers dropped almost half to 43% from a year ago. So it's not working. In order to fix the financing situation for cities, they're going to have to install a property tax. And once again, they haven't gone down that road yet in any material fashion. Now, Zero Hedge actually looked at this issue and they believe that China's on a verge of a debt jubilee. That's how bad they feel the issue is. I'm not so sure that we're at that level yet, and I'm going to explain that next. Now, Zero Hedge goes on to state that while rising non-performing loans for Chinese banks are manageable for now, more risk events are likely to come at the backdrop of China's growth slowdown, residents' expectation for worse future income, and shrinking property sales. At that point, Beijing will be forced with a stark choice. Either they inject a massive amount of liquidity into the market, or brace for the biggest fear for every Chinese politician, which is a middle-class insurrection. And so Zero Hedge says that that's how bad this situation could get, and they do believe that the politicians will inject a whole load of capital, and so they will not pick the situation where the market collapses. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a debt jubilee is, this is effectively taking private debt and making it public. So the government takes on the mortgages or debt from the individual people, but of course, the governments are already straddled with a lot of debt, so they can't handle the burden of the debt based on the tax revenues that they're collecting. So they have to print currency to pay it down. And thus they end up devaluing the currency and hurting the holders of the bonds, hurting the holders of the mortgage-backed securities, and of course, the people who are holding onto the currency itself. Now, I do encourage you to continue to look up what a debt jubilee is and what the potential risks are of it further on your own. I'm not going to dive into any more in this video, but you can see that China is taking these revolts seriously and they're seeking to quell it as quickly as they can. And you can see that they have a two-pronged strategy. First, the CCP is going to do CCP things, which is scrubbing any conversations of these boycotts in the online platforms. The second thing that they're going to do is on Sunday of this past week, the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission asked banks to provide credit to eligible developers so they can complete the unfinished projects, which is what an official told to the regulator's newspaper. Now, like I always say, there are still risks here. Just because this sort of issue might be squashed, there are still massive risks for the Chinese property sector. Add on that a slowdown in the Chinese economy itself. Add on that a slowdown in the Western economies, which will further reverberate to an additional slowdown in China. And you might be thinking, okay, I might want to diversify a little bit outside of China. I don't have the majority of my portfolio in China. In fact, my exposure is now down to around 10% or so in the country. It might be closer to 5%. I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of opportunities outside of China, especially in this market as it's been declining. And so you can see here, because the market is challenged right now and it's been coming down, there are opportunities which I'm attempting to uncover and make available to the Patreons. Currently, there are 9 companies trading at a value that's less than 50% of their intrinsic value. And the list is growing each week as the market continues to decline. And so I unhighlighted a couple opportunities. I'm still a huge believer in Alibaba. Obviously, that's a Chinese exposed name. I'm a huge believer in Foot Locker and Alphabet. Now with Foot Locker, there are some unique risks there, and I do encourage you to check out my video on Foot Locker. But the real question is, how do you get access to this tracker and all the models that accompany the tracker? Well, you can get access to the tracker and all the models that come along with it at the lower tier of the Patreons. And if you want to join us for an epic live presentation every month where my very best work is reserved for that call, you can join us on our monthly Zoom call, which is on the upper tier of the Patreon level. And I did mention quite a few times on this video that I did do a 4-part series on the Chinese property market. And if you haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's really well done. And you can get access to the first video of that 4-part series right here.